How is that delivery of vaccines going, and how long are you anticipating, essentially, for people to get vaccinated and start taking to the skies again? And just a timeline, which is perhaps a bit difficult, but before we get to some sense of normality.
Yeah, good morning. We started in terms of distributing the vaccines and helping in the big effort to actually distribute the vaccines in high dosages throughout the country, right? So we started last week sending vaccines for the first time into 2 cities down south. And so we expect this effort, it's really a national effort to get the vaccines distributed as quickly as we can all throughout the 7,100 islands of the Philippines, right? We expect this to last throughout the year. The government plans and the government initiatives is to have probably several million doses by the third quarter in country and being distributed widely.
Alex, the other part of the question was, when do you expect things to get normal? How bad has it been, and what's your cash burn like during this past year been like?
Yeah, it's no secret. I mean, the entire aviation sector in Cebu Pacific was hit badly by the lockdowns and the entire pandemic, right? So today, we're still operating only about a quarter of our capacity network-wide. So we're seeing hopeful signs of a recovery. Recently, the Philippine government relaxed some of the travel restrictions domestically. So we saw a spike up in our bookings just in the past few weeks as a result of the Philippine government actually coming out with this resolution, sort of standardizing the travel requirements and making it easier for travelers to go from province to province.
Alex, cargo perhaps has mitigated some of these losses. How much has it? And is that something that you see continuing to act in this vein when we do get to a post-COVID world?
Yeah, cargo's been sort of the savior for us. During the pandemic, it was our source of revenue, a big important source of revenue. One of the things that the Philippine government did as well was to make sure that while the passenger travel restrictions were in place domestically, they put out guidance to say cargo should remain unimpeded. The flow of goods should remain unimpeded domestically as well as internationally. So we've seen cargo sort of jump in its importance for our total revenues. In the third quarter alone of 2020, it provided close to 2/3 of our revenue. Historically, cargo's been at about 7-8% of total group revenue. Now today, during this pandemic, it's providing a much bigger source of revenue for us. In fact, in some of our other businesses, like especially in the international side of cargo, we're actually seeing some growth relative to last year's levels. Whereas on the passenger side, it's still a marked decline in terms of revenue.
Alex, we heard earlier from the IATA chief saying that travel will not return perhaps in 3 to 4 years. What are you doing in anticipation of that? Are you relooking at your perhaps medium term or rather medium haul flights? Are you intending to cut workers further?
Yeah, we undertook quite a lot of action last year in anticipation of these conditions, precisely these conditions. We knew that a year ago, people were talking about when we went into the pandemic that there would be possibility of a V-shaped recovery, a quick recovery once the travel restrictions were lifted, right? Today, nobody's talking about a V-shaped recovery. It's really the scenarios that we're all planning around. It's going to be a much slower recovery and a much longer recovery for everyone involved. Our own expectations is that, yes, on the international side, it's going to be longer, but we think in terms of our domestic business, that recovery is going to come sooner. Now, the other stuff that we're doing in anticipation of that scenario is that we've recently raised additional capital. What we're saying is that we need the additional resources. So we raised 16 billion pesos from a syndicate of banks for 10-year loans. We just completed our offer for stock rights, which should result in about 12.5 billion pesos of additional capital coming into the business. So with that kind of capital raising exercise, that we're anticipating that's going to give us the working capital to move forward. And no matter how long it takes to actually recover, we're prepared for that.
So Alex, quickly, having said that, having raised more than 300 million, might you need additional funding the rest of the year, or that is it for 2021?
I think that's it. We're happy with the outcome of that, and we got a very good response from both our lenders as well as the shareholders on that. So we think that's sufficient. We keep saying it gives us the long runway to actually be able to wait it out. So when the recovery comes, and it's really just a question of when it's actually going to come rather than if it's going to come, we're prepared and we can actually ramp up our operations to respond to the consumer demand.